Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started as one of those quiet evenings when the city lights looked softer than usual, and everything felt heavier: the air, the silence, the unspoken words between us. He sat on the edge of the sofa, shoulders tense, eyes fixed somewhere on the floor as if trying to find answers that weren't there. I stood near the window, pretending to be interested in the rain outside, but my heart was racing faster than the drops hitting the glass. There had been tension for weeks, the kind that lingers in every glance, every pause, every half-finished sentence. We both knew something was coming, but neither of us was brave enough to start it. Until that night. When I turned around, his gaze finally met mine. There was something dangerous and magnetic about it, something that made it impossible to look away. He didn't say a word. He just stood, slow and deliberate, and before I could process it, he closed the space between us. The sound of the rain faded as the room filled with a strange stillness, a quiet that demanded attention. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, every heartbeat louder. I could feel the energy shift. It was no longer about what had been said or unsaid, it was about everything we'd been holding back. And when his hand reached out, it wasn't just to touch me, it was to make me feel every moment we'd both been avoiding. For a second, I thought I should move, say something, stop him, but I didn't. Maybe because I didn't want to. Maybe because some part of me had been waiting for this. His hand slid to my arm, his breath warm against my ear, and all the air seemed to leave the room. Time slowed. But just when I thought I knew what was coming, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of hesitation, or maybe control, before he pulled me closer, guiding me toward the sofa with a mix of gentleness and restraint that made everything even more intense. His voice, low and rough, broke the silence. "You don't trust yourself around me, do you?" I wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. My pulse was too loud. His presence too close. And then, he leaned in, his breath brushing against the back of my neck, close enough for every nerve to ignite. But instead of what I expected next, he stopped, eyes meeting mine again with a question I didn't know how to answer. The moment hung there, sharp, heavy, unfinished. And that's where it all began. What would you have done in that moment? Would you step away, or stay and see what happens next? Tell me in the comments below, and if you want to know how the night unfolded, make sure to watch the next part. The air between us felt different after that moment, heavier, charged, and filled with things we still couldn't say out loud. I remember the way he pulled back slightly, as if to give me a chance to breathe, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. There was something in that look, not just attraction, but something deeper, like he was fighting a part of himself he didn't want me to see. I sat down slowly, still trying to steady my heartbeat. The room felt smaller now, the rain still tapping softly against the windows, and the dim light casting shadows across his face. He finally broke the silence, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "You shouldn't look at me like that," he said, but the corner of his mouth lifted in a way that told me he didn't really mean it. We'd known each other for months, through long days at work, quick coffee breaks that turned into conversations that lasted too long, and shared rides home that always ended with an awkward goodbye. But underneath all of it, there had been a pull neither of us could ignore. It wasn't just about attraction, it was about timing, boundaries, and everything that made it wrong but impossible to let go of. He ran a hand through his hair, looking almost frustrated, and said, "You make it hard to think straight." His tone wasn't angry, it was honest. And somehow, that made my chest tighten even more. I could feel the truth in his words, the conflict in his expression. He wasn't just battling what he felt, he was trying to protect something, maybe me, maybe himself. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every second. The quiet moments stretched between us like a thread ready to snap. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, but I already knew. I could see it in the way his fingers tightened around the edge of the sofa, in the way he avoided my eyes when I said his name softly. He finally looked up again, and for a second, the world outside disappeared. "If we do this," he said carefully, "nothing goes back to the way it was." That single sentence hit harder than I expected. My throat went dry. There was so much weight behind it, years of restraint, unspoken feelings, and something that felt dangerously close to confession. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him, feeling the tension pull tighter between us, knowing we were standing at the edge of something we couldn't undo. The night stretched on, long and uncertain. Neither of us moved from where we were, him leaning against the edge of the sofa, me sitting just a few feet away, caught somewhere between wanting to leave and wanting to stay. The storm outside had grown stronger, rain sliding down the windows like slow tears. Every flicker of lightning lit up his face in fragments, his jaw tense, eyes shadowed, mouth pressed into a line that looked like restraint. He broke the silence first. "You don't understand what you're doing to me," he said, his voice low but trembling at the edges. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper. Something that came from wanting something he shouldn't. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because anything I said might make it real. I had always known there was more to him than he let people see. At work, he was composed, controlled, almost unreadable. But that control cracked whenever we were alone. There were moments, small ones, that told me he was carrying something heavy. A past maybe, or a promise he couldn't break. And every time I got close, he'd pull away, as if protecting both of us from something neither of us could name. When I finally asked, "Why are you so afraid of this?" he looked at me for a long time before replying. "Because I've been here before," he said quietly. "And last time, someone got hurt. That changed everything." His words hung in the air like a confession. I wanted to ask who, how, why, but he turned away before I could. There was a story there, one he wasn't ready to tell yet. And maybe part of me was afraid to hear it. The tension between us wasn't just about attraction anymore, it was about timing, past choices, and what we were risking just by standing in the same room. Every glance felt loaded with 1,000 unsaid things. Every breath felt like a decision. At one point, I thought about leaving. I even reached for my bag, but he stopped me, his hand hovering just close enough to make my heart race again. "Don't," he whispered. "Not yet." Something in his tone made me stay. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. And that was what scared me most. Because I realized then that maybe we were both standing on the edge, pretending we could walk away when we knew we wouldn't. The rain outside started to slow, the thunder drifting farther away, but inside the room, the storm hadn't passed at all. The storm had faded outside, but inside the room, it felt like it had just begun. The air was thick with words neither of us dared to say. He stood by the window now, arms crossed, staring out into the darkness like he could find his answers somewhere in the night. I could see the struggle in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breathing slowed as if he was trying to steady himself. "I told you before," he said finally, his voice low but steady, "if we cross this line, everything changes." His reflection in the glass looked distant, almost haunted. "You don't know what that means yet." I wanted to ask, what line? What secret? But I already knew it wasn't just about us, it was about something that had already broken him once. Something he didn't want to repeat. I stepped closer, slow enough that he could stop me if he wanted. He didn't. When I reached him, he turned, and for a brief second, the look in his eyes almost made me forget to breathe. It wasn't anger or fear anymore, it was a kind of surrender. The kind people fight for as long as they can until they finally realize they've already lost. His hand brushed against mine, hesitant but deliberate. The touch was small, but it felt like the start of something that could either heal or destroy both of us. He said softly, "You shouldn't be here tonight," yet his fingers didn't move away. There was a pause, a fragile silence that could break with a single heartbeat. I could see it in his eyes, he was trying to hold back, trying to keep whatever wall he had left from falling. But it was already cracking. Then his phone buzzed. Once. Twice. The sound sliced through the moment like a blade. He looked at the screen, and his entire expression changed, a shadow falling over him that made my chest tighten. It's her, he murmured, almost to himself. I didn't know who her was, but the way he said it made it clear, whoever she was the reason he couldn't let me in. The reason he hesitated every time we got close. He didn't answer the call. He just stared at the phone until it stopped ringing, then looked up at me with eyes that carried too many truths he wasn't ready to share. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice quieter now, more fragile. But once I do, there's no going back. The room felt like it stopped breathing. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. And in that moment, just before he spoke, I realized, whatever he was about to say would change everything. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the floor like the right words were somewhere beneath his feet. The rain had finally stopped outside, but the quiet that followed felt heavier than the storm itself. I could see the conflict in his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers trembled slightly as he held the phone. Whatever he was about to say wasn't simple. It wasn't something he could take back once it left his lips. Finally, he looked up. She wasn't just someone I used to know, he said quietly. She was the reason I promised myself I'd never let this happen again. His tone was calm, but the emotion behind it wasn't. It was like every word cost him a piece of strength he didn't have to spare. I took a breath, trying to understand. You're talking about the woman who called, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Her name's Claire. We were together a long time ago. I thought I knew what love was back then, but she broke me in ways I didn't think were possible. He paused, glancing toward the window again as if seeing ghosts in the reflection. She didn't just leave, he continued, his voice rough now. She left after destroying everything, my trust, my peace, my sense of who I was. And the worst part? I let her. I stayed silent. I could feel his pain in every word. But what I didn't expect was what came next. She's back, he said finally, looking straight at me. And she's been trying to reach me for weeks. My heart skipped. Why? I don't know, he admitted, shaking his head. But she knows about you. The words hit like ice. I didn't even know how to respond. We weren't even together, not really, not officially, but still, hearing that someone else knew about whatever was happening between us made it feel suddenly real. Real enough to be dangerous. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the floor now. She's unpredictable, he said. When she found out I was seeing someone from work, he stopped mid-sentence, his voice tightening. Let's just say she doesn't take rejection well. I stepped closer, trying to steady my voice. So you're saying she's trying to ruin this, before it even starts? He looked at me then, eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. I'm saying she already has. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed again, this time with a message. The screen lit up, and even from where I stood, I saw my name in the text. Does she know what you did? My stomach dropped. He turned the phone off instantly, but it was too late. The damage was done. Tell me what she's talking about, I said, heart pounding. He didn't answer right away. His silence was louder than any confession could have been. Finally, he whispered, there's something you need to know about that night, the night we first met. The words hung in the air like a fuse waiting to ignite. Every part of me wanted to know what he meant, and yet, a small voice deep down was terrified to find out. He hesitated for what felt like forever. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock and the rain dripping from the eaves outside. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. That night we met, it wasn't an accident, he said. I stared at him, trying to process the words. What do you mean? He took a slow breath, looking almost ashamed. Claire sent me to you. The room went still. My heartbeat roared in my ears. He continued before I could say anything. She wanted me to find out if you were involved with the company that fired her. She said you had something to do with it, that you were part of the reason she lost everything. I didn't believe her at first, but she made it sound so convincing. I told myself I'd just talk to you, figure out the truth, and walk away. His eyes dropped to the floor. But then I met you, and everything changed. The truth hit hard. All the late nights, the glances, the tension, it all had started as a lie. I wanted to be angry, to shout, but all I could do was whisper, so this was all part of her plan? He shook his head quickly. At first, yes. But not anymore. I swear, I stopped listening to her weeks ago. She's been calling, showing up, threatening to ruin both of us if I don't do what she wants. But I can't. Not after everything we've shared. I turned away, trying to think, trying to breathe. Every memory between us suddenly felt fragile, real yet tainted. He stepped closer, his voice low and pleading. I should have told you sooner. I just didn't know how. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door made us both freeze. It was late, too late for visitors. He glanced at me, then at the door. The tension in his face returned instantly. Don't move, he whispered. He opened it just enough to see outside. My chest tightened when I heard a familiar voice from the hall, a woman's voice. Calm. Cold. Still keeping secrets, I see, she said. It was Claire. I couldn't see her face, but the sound of her voice was enough to chill the air. She stepped closer, her heels echoing on the floor. You really thought you could lie to both of us? She asked, her eyes shifting toward me. He stepped between us immediately, but she just smiled. You didn't tell her everything, did you? Her next words changed everything. You weren't the only one I sent. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. My voice trembled. What are you talking about? She smiled faintly. Ask him who else has been watching you. And in that moment, the look on his face told me she wasn't lying. For a moment, the room was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, thick with the sound of everything that's about to fall apart. Claire's words lingered in the air, heavy and sharp. I looked at him, searching his face for something, denial, truth, anything. But what I saw was guilt. Real, raw guilt. She's lying, he said quickly, stepping toward me. But his voice cracked, and that was all the answer I needed. My chest tightened as I whispered, who else? He didn't speak at first. Then, with a breath that sounded like defeat, he said, your best friend. Emily. She worked with Claire before she got fired. She told Claire about you, about your job, everything. Claire used me to get close, and Emily helped her set it all up. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Emily, the person I trusted most, had been part of it. The realization burned more than the betrayal itself. I turned toward Claire, but she was already walking away, her voice calm and cold. Don't hate me, she said without looking back. Hate the part of you that believed in love so easily. When the door shut behind her, the silence returned. Only this time, it wasn't heavy, it was empty. He stood there, eyes full of regret. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he said softly. But everything I felt for you, that was real. I wanted to believe him. Maybe part of me still did. But sometimes love isn't about believing, it's about knowing when to walk away. I took a step back, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Maybe that's the problem, I said quietly. Maybe it was too real. The rain started again, softer this time, like a quiet reminder that endings don't always come with closure, just acceptance. I left without another word, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring wasn't enough. As I closed the door behind me, I realized love doesn't always destroy us, sometimes it just teaches us how to rebuild.